On this Wednesday, big stuff. How we doing? How we doing? Okay. All right. And again, I was just kidding with the senior skip days, but hey, some claim tradition, when it comes to those, all that. I was in high school and all that at some point. So there we go. So with that, we'll just start off with, when we look at, I started off the week with that this is a big week in Minnesota, and it has proven to be a big week in Minnesota, hasn't it? It has. There's a lot going on. And so, again, the nation's eyes were focused on Minnesota yesterday, and, the verdict came in. The verdict came in. And Derek Chauvin was convicted on all 3 counts that he was charged with, which, again, like I had said, it's unusual in the state of Minnesota convicting an officer, and convicted an officer. All right. And so it had been it took 11 hours to arrive at that verdict. Almost 11 months from the time that since the death of George Floyd. So, and with that now, how's it going to play out? In the next 8 weeks, next 8 weeks, there's still that process that needs to go on. Appeals can be filed. The judge reviews the case in the many aspects of it, looks at the trial proceedings. There'll be evaluations of Derek Chauvin. What's that? Could possibly. So if we look at sentencing, yeah, it could be. I think we're going to expect the state to ask for more, or the maximum amount, and the max of I think the most serious one could be 20 years for a total. But that's it for the max. All right. But again, but that sentencing part will be in about 8 weeks when they'll have that sentencing. So you have the trial and the verdict, that's one part. And then the other part is sentencing. So it's about 8 weeks in that part. So, but we have to remember also that there still will be a trial for the 3 other officers, in addition to Derek Chauvin. So that still needs to happen. So we can, kind of like have a little sigh here for a moment, but we still have that trial. And then we also have a trial for the officer that was involved in Daunte Wright's shooting. And then, of course, yesterday, what happened, I want to say in Ohio. All right, another shooting. Okay, so big stuff. Tremaine. That, is it August? Okay, all right, good. Because I think that trial has somehow been lost, in this whole thing with potential. All right. All right, so here we go. You're talking about, the justice system, in that we always want a quick and speedy trial. But, you'll hear lawyers on both sides saying we want to make sure that we do get it right. All right. So again, we can talk about theories and all that stuff that goes with it. And so it does seem like it's a long time. But in the case of this, Derek Chauvin, it's come out where all the evidence, all the stuff has worked out in what many say is the right outcome. So it's a process. It's a process. And both sides in that process can, in some ways, try to expedite it or draw it out. I mean, in this past case, I mean, there was attempts to move the venue and bring in other issues with it in order to kind of drag it out. And so the legal process doesn't work on the timeline we want to work on. We want it quick. We want it immediate. We want it fast. You know, one of our amendments will say we have a right to a fair and speedy trial. All right, and so I guess we have to think about what goes into speediness of it. So, but I think that second trial, in many ways, was going to hinge on, you know, was going to be when this trial gets done, and so now it's done. All right. So now, you know, there's a wide range of feelings, of course, that were being expressed around here in Minnesota, but of course around the nation as well. And now, where do we go from here? So this is where we talk about that next step. And so that's where it's about change, you know, creating change and what that change looks like. And now it's up to lawmakers and civic leaders. Of course, you know, citizens kind of continue to put that pressure. Go ahead.
I have a question. So with the problems that we've been talking about in America, has there been anywhere else in the country or in the world and in history where this has happened to a specific or to, I'll say, a group of people, like 5 police officers or people of like authority against?
Yeah. You know, my immediate response is in South Africa would be my immediate response to that. But you can go to the nation of Israel and see how Palestinians may feel about the police system and the authority system in Israel. Could be an example. Or look at perhaps how in the nation of India, how people who are viewed as outside of society have been treated. So you can find, you know, we want to, it's natural for us to look at what's happening here and then think that it's just happening here, it's not happening around. But you will find in many countries that they have issues. They have issues. They do. England has a history as well of treating people of color unfairly. Yep. Nope. That's fair. Very, very fair. Anyone else? Anyone else? So the moment is here, and whether or not, you know, again, civic leaders and lawmakers pick up on it and make some changes. You know, I look back at, you know, in 11th grade, we're studying the civil rights movement, and we look at organizations like the Black Panther Party. Why was it being created? Out of the police brutality in Oakland. When we look at a civil rights commission that was put together right at the end of World War II. And they come up with a document called To Secure These Rights, and 4 main points, and one of them was about police brutality. So we are keenly aware of the issue. It's about what you're going to do about it, kind of approach. That's the big thing. Anyone else? Anyone else here? Go ahead.
Do you think this is going to be like a moment where, well, do you think that the moment when you knew the verdict, is that going to be a moment that you're going to dispute? Like, kind of like when a famous celebrity dies, you kind of remember where you are, like 9/11.
Oh, heck yeah. I know. I would agree with you. I would agree with you on that one. You do remember those moments. You know, the 9/11 piece. I do remember when the race riot happens in 1992. I remember when you know, the famous chase of O.J. Simpson on the California highway. I remember that, sitting in an emergency room at Regions, and I'm watching it on TV, and there happened to be a former student of mine, and we're watching it. So you remember those moments. I remember when Ronald Reagan gets shot. You know, so these are defining moments that stick with you. They do. Yeah. Anyone else? Go ahead.
How comparable do you think the events that have unfolded over the past year and a half? How comparable are they, like past historical events, so like fighting racial difference, and like how successful do you think will be this time?
It's always that's a fair. You know, I would like to say it's different times. We're gonna have some changes. But if we look at past practices, changes have happened, but they have been short-lived. You know, 1967, 68, we had race riots around the United States, and cities like Minneapolis had created citizen review boards to look at how we take on race issues and how we work with different agencies in the city of Minneapolis. That lasted for a little while, and then it went away. So turning short-term gains into long-term gains, that's an area that we have to work on.
I agree, and I feel like, my opinion, I knew he was guilty. It's what's done after. The justice was served, but the reform and things, the law changes afterwards. That will make a big difference, not just the trial.
Yep. Yeah.
And people need to, lawmakers or whoever does it needs to move forward and continue to change.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Valid point. Just coming to school today, I listened to George Floyd's youngest sibling, his youngest brother, talking on the radio, and he said right away he thought about not only his brother, but he thought about Emmett Till and what that had, what has transpired since Emmett Till to his brother's death. And for me, that I think, I can reflect on the Emmett Till and see that, okay, how we have over time, our ideas and our attitudes and have changed to some degree. I'm not going to say completely, to some degree. Yeah.
Lately, I've been thinking about how this whole situation connects to history books and stuff.
Yeah.
Like how Brown versus Board of Education was the case that put change in America, that forced that hand. And it's really interesting because I think that this is going to be kind of the one that forces the hand a little bit, just like the Brown versus Education, because Brown versus Board of Education took a little bit for it to actually kick in. Like, schools were still segregated for years after that, but it was like this very slow change that ended up integrating schools. And I think that this is going to be that. There's going to have to be you're going to have to make a few more examples out of people, just like Derek Chauvin was. But I think that this is that.
Yes. You're hoping that that does become the case. It's a very, you bring some really good points, about the Brown versus the Board of Education in this case and change. What possibly, and those at home, if you want, you can put in the chat, what possibly could contribute to this being change. All right. So Brown versus Board of Education, it did take time. All right. It took time because you have to get the federal government, the different levels of the federal government, to get on the same page and do something about it. All right. President needs to force, Congress needs to build more comprehensive laws to take on. The Supreme Court needs to continue to do that. And then you have to have local governments as well to be on board. Okay. And that took time. So what could possibly be different today that could maybe mean the change is going to happen quicker? Nico?
I think, well, firstly, I think people need to differentiate between questions.
Okay.
Like, change can be relatively, like, relative compared to how we think things can be, like, in a positive or negative. So some government guy can think change is this realistic situation where the people think it's something completely different.
Yep.
And so that could also result in how progression relatively, like, varies according to how we see change. And I feel like us as the younger people, like, I know it's kind of like us being our idols and everything, but like having an open perspective and like growing up through these like events of change kind of helps us like keep that perspective. And when we eventually get to the positions of people who are in power now, I feel like that perspective will help.
All right. Well said. Well said. Progression, change. Okay. It's in some ways, you hear someone says, I'm a progressive. All right. What's that mean? What do you mean? People from different parties can say I'm a progressive, but what does that really mean? Go ahead.
Do you think that this? So we call in history the time between like the 40s and the 60s, like that's the civil rights.
Okay.
What would this be considered? Because I think that I don't know. I don't think that the civil rights movement ever really ended.
Right.
Because like you have over like early 2010s, that's when gay rights were, they were given rights or more rights, and over these past few years we've been fighting for other rights too. So, do you think that this would still be considered the civil rights movement?
I'm with you in that I don't think the civil rights movement has ever stopped. And we do look at the 50s and the 60s kind of like, here's where some big credible changes, laws, and all that stuff being passed. But that would not acknowledge all the stuff that has happened before it and then all the stuff after. Because there has been. And the civil rights movement, remember, it was about changing the social fabric of the United States and getting the United States to live up to its ideals that we find in many of our, what we call our framework documents. These are our beliefs. And so civil rights movement and the quest for civil rights, I don't think will ever stop. I don't think so. Change over time. I always like looking at, for me, I guess, I philosophize as a historian. This is where I look at movements over time. And there are moments in which it is in full action, then it might slow down a little bit, and then we can analyze why does it slow down, and then it picks up again. I mean, we are studying the Cold War. Here is a reason that puts civil rights maybe secondary to international Cold War events. Why Truman and Eisenhower might have been a little bit slow. Kennedy might have been slow, and Lyndon Johnson, Cold War was there, but he really wanted to focus on creating what he said a great society, but had to deal with some Cold War issues. And so, so when we look at when civil rights is picking up, we have to look at what is also happening for us as a nation. and we can find maybe some of those moments that draws our attention away. But civil rights, it will always be an issue. Will always be an issue. Something to strive for. What do you got?
I feel like that's a really tough.
That's a tough. You're right. That's a tough question to take on. I think, you know, when one can you really truly be satisfied? Can you truly be rested? Again, we shouldn't, in theory, be having these fights, because in theory, if we look at all our philosophically, and we look at all our laws and our documents and everything, everyone should be equal. Everyone should be treated the same, but we don't. We don't. You know, is it whoever is in power wants to find whatever way it is to stay in power? Is it a matter of control? A lot of things going on. I don't know if I can fully. I mean, I understand your point. I hope. Holy cow! I hope we get to that point. You know.
We all know the past, and that all Americans know, and racism, unfortunately, is taught in the home. And the fact, like in the South, the Confederate flag is still legal to fly. When you look in comparison in like Germany, the Nazi flag is outlawed, but people can still fly that flag. I feel like the change needs to start in the homes, because if people are constantly brought up listening to their parents and their grandparents' values, I guess. I don't know if values is the word, beliefs. We can't move forward.
Okay.
I agree. I think it's like a generational thing, and I hope at least we're going to see progression. Because I feel like our generation is like a step forward. So I hope that, like Grace said, like starts in the home, like we can raise our kids through these experiences, and almost help them create a bigger push as well.
That I mean, those are all really good points. Those are all really good points about, you know, ultimately, how are we going to arrive at an equal society? It's about, you know, how we are learning the messaging and where we're learning that messaging. So it could be at home, it could be here in school and all that. There are so many factors that are going to lead to it. Nico?
Yeah, I think that's one thing. So I feel like everything that's happened so far, we should be like everyone who's participated in like all like credit as well. Like you can like at least once you probably bring some family members and like all the people with them and those probably well, like already I think we're taking big steps in accomplishing that. And I feel like it has to do a lot with like ideals. Like yeah, we should definitely match our ideals. Take a step to understand where it differentiates between all contrasts.
So perhaps, you know, as you know, these next few days and weeks unfold, I think it's important for us to look at how people are reacting to what has happened, not just in the CG or in the Twin Cities, but see how it's happening in greater Minnesota and the nation and in the world. How are they responding to it? And that could probably give a little bit more insight into, are we ever going to create the more perfect union? All right. Tremaine?
I think like.
Oh, Tremaine.
Oh, you said Tremaine?
Well, I was going to go with Trey. But you go ahead.
I think based off of like trying to connect what we learned through history and what our kids will learn through history is like we look at slavery as that was clearly a wrong thing. But there was people who were sitting there like fighting for slavery to be a thing. But now it's common sense that that is wrong. And those people who did fight to end slavery, they were on the right side of history. Now we look at it through like the segregation times. They were on the right side of history, and that's the wrong side of history. Now we see there are two sides to this battle right now. See the right side of history. Now we're moving forward, and our kids will be like, why was that even a problem? Like just kind of like slavery. Like, why did that even exist? Later on, our kids will probably be doing the same thing we did.
So someone out there thought that a racial difference was a bigger problem than, was a bigger disease than the one of the pandemic. So I got some
Okay. Good points. So we'll see. Maybe the 21st century will be our defining, changing moment. There we go. Big stuff there. All right. Anyone else have some final thoughts on that? Some big stuff. All right. Well, good. Thank you for those who have shared your thoughts, and if you didn't, hopefully you are reflecting and soaked in what has been said. A lot of good comments here and so forth. With that. So with that, we will try to get to our regular scheduled programming here, and we try to transition into our what we are studying here on the Cold War, and it is coming to an end, the Cold War. You are looking at the collapse of communism, and that activity is due today, and you're looking at the three countries that are being spotlighted in Eastern Europe, and you're seeing that they have a desire for change as well, and a better standard of living, and an opportunity to just simply be able to move from one country to another, or just simply move around their country without concern and fear, and have choice on who their leaders are. Now, I do have a video clip here, and I do want to show it because it brings us end and perhaps some final meaning to the war itself, as it reflects on the 45 years that we say, 45, 46 years that we say of the Cold War and what it did to society. Again, if I look at us here in the United States and make some connections, like I had already said, it did put off some social issues and some social changes because of the Cold War. And so this clip will just reflect on that. And the Soviet Union, it just seems very anticlimactic in many ways, in that it just ceases to be, like a stroke of a pen. Just it ceases to be here. All right. So here we go. Let's watch this little clip, and then.
No leader of a small country is worrying, saying to his cabinet, one of these two crazy superpowers is going to get us caught up in a nuclear war. That is not going to happen.
Those of us who experienced what I would call the fever of the Cold War The permanent state of alarm about the prospect of a nuclear war. We breathe more easily now. We no longer have to carry this heavy burden.
The Cold War ended peaceably, but need it have begun? Could it all have been avoided when East and West were comrades back in 1945?
We missed our chance because there were so many suspicions on both sides. The West exaggerated the strength of the Soviet Union. We could not possibly have moved into Europe. We were a devastated country. We'd lost millions of people.
I can't imagine any circumstances under which we could have gotten along with Uncle Joe Stalin. I can imagine no circumstances under which we could have worked out our problems with Russia earlier than we did, or in a different way. I've come to the conclusion we did it pretty goddamn well.
Millions who might have died in nuclear conflict lived and prospered. But there were costs, human and material, and a price to pay. The manufacture and testing of nuclear weapons left a continuing mark.
The legacy of the Cold War really means that the Cold War is still going on. It's going on because the air, water, and soil are polluted. It's very expensive and difficult to overcome this legacy. It's really a delayed action time bomb.
During the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union between them spent trillions of dollars on armaments. The United States, borrowing heavily, could afford it. The Soviet Union, in the end, could not. Part of that vast cost was necessary to maintain the balance on which world peace depended. Some of it was wasted. There were shooting wars within the Cold War. They took their toll. In Korea, millions died. And millions in Vietnam, soldiers and civilians. Over 1 million died in Afghanistan. Hundreds of thousands died in Africa and in Central America. Some of these wars would have happened anyway. The Cold War made them more deadly. Thousands died in a divided Europe. $200 at the Berlin Wall. The living mourn the dead.
Неправда. И камни говорят даже. Я прихожу сюда на могилу сына и только облегчаю здесь свою боль. Могу успокоиться, поговорить с ним, посоветоваться.
And look, he's right here, where my lips can reach him. He isn't up high where I can't reach him or down low where I can't bend anymore. He's right here in front of me.
The Cold War was a clash of ideologies. And the big Cold War loser was Marxism-Leninism. The communist dream of a better society that would outlast the West came to nothing. But not for Fidel Castro.
Why believe that the ideals of socialism, which are so generous and appeal so much to solidarity and fraternity, will one day disappear? What would prevail? Selfishness? Individualism? Personal ambitions? That will not save the world. Of that I'm absolutely convinced.
Communism as a system went against life, against man's fundamental needs, against the need for freedom, the need to be enterprising, to associate freely, against the will of the nation. It suppressed national identity. Something that goes against life may last a long time, but sooner or later it will collapse.
The superpowers had confronted each other relentlessly. Now, under intolerable pressure, one side withdrew. Gorbachev had done as much as anyone to end the Cold War. He called Bush and told him this was his last day in office.
There was a kind of sadness. The finality of it hit me pretty hard, and it was Christmas time and holiday time. And I felt that a friend was hurt, and I wasn't happy about that.
That night, the red flag of the Soviet Union was lowered for the last time. In Washington, Bush made his Christmas broadcast.
For over 40 years, the United States led the West in the struggle against communism and the threat it posed to our most precious values. This struggle shaped the lives of all Americans. It forced all nations to live under the specter of nuclear destruction. That confrontation is now over.
In which President George Bush had given a speech. So now our concern is, the Soviet Union collapsed, it's gone, and you have the creation of what we call the Commonwealth of nations, or Commonwealth of Independent States. Where our concern was, who has the nukes now in the old Soviet Union? We know Russia does, but Ukraine and Kazakhstan, Belarus might have also had them as well. So there we go. Cold War has come to a conclusion. All right. So, anyone have any thoughts? So your task for the next 30 minutes is, let's see if you can, or 35 minutes, is to wrap up your collapse of communism. You also have it till 11:59 tonight to get it done as well, and begin that prep process. Tomorrow in class, it's more of a work day. Finish up any loose ends that you may have for assignments, prep for the Cold War assessment, or actually take the Cold War assessment, because it'll be opened up at 8:30 tomorrow, so you can just take the assessment in class as well. All right. That assessment needs to be done though by Friday.
Oh, that's Friday.
Friday, 11:59. Yep. So give you a couple day window. Yep. Any other questions, Grace?
No, that's my question.
Okay. All right. With that, I will let you to work on this, and if you need a space to also kind of reflect on what is happening, these past couple of days, we can also find you a space for that too. All right, those at home, you can stay on or exit and have a great day.